Good morning. We are here with Rabbi Akiva Mann, who is going to speak with us about the guide for the perplexed, Maimonides, and the book that changed Judaism. Please begin, Rabbi, and would everybody else please turn off your microphones?
Okay, hello everybody, and nearly happy Purim to everybody.
Same to you.
Okay, so friends, we ended last week with Maimonides, with what I think what Maimonides is trying to help us perceive is that divine providence is inextricably interconnected with our sense of divine presence. We tend to perceive divine providence as divine intervening into the natural course of the world. I think, correct me if you don't see it this way, but I do believe that there is a bit of a misconception about divine intervention, and Maimonides is turning divine intervention on its head and says, do not perceive divine intervention as a lightning bolt or a divine interference into the ways of nature, into our altering our the natural flow of life. He's saying don't perceive it that way. In Maimonides's mind, divine intervention has to do a little less with divinity and a little bit more about how we perceive divinity through the medium of our own experiential divine experience. He seems to be saying that the more we live in divine presence, the more we perceive divinity in our world, the more we will be freed from pain and distress that the world that the world offers us during our lifetime. It's more, I think Maimonides is saying it's more up here for us. Up here, it's in our heads. It has to do with our sight, with the lenses that we have evolved or developed within ourselves of how we are going to be viewing our life, how we are going to be approaching the gifts of life and the distresses of life. And that's why he very much emphasizes that only according to our perception is the commensurate amount of divine intervention going to be working for us. It turns out that according to Maimonides, providential protection, so to speak, providential protection, hashgacha, is inextricably connected to our perception and our awareness of divine presence. In fact, he says in other parts of the Guide for the Perplexed and other writings of his. Listen to this. He says, how does one attain Ahavat Hashem and Yirat Hashem? How does one attain an awareness of the love of divinity, the love of God, Ahavat Hashem and Yirat Hashem, and being in awe, acquiring the awesome presence of divinity in our lives. And one would think, I mean, if I would ask you this, one would think, hey, Maimonides would say studying, learning, mitzvot, Torah, mitzvot, and he doesn't answer that way. He says, how does one acquire a closeness, a proximity, a presence of divinity, and an awesome, a sense of like that Heschel, the wonder of divinity, the wonder of just being alive, the radical amazement. How does one acquire that? And he simply says, go out to nature. He simply says, invest, this is, I guess, the scientist, the intellectual, not the philosophical, but the scientist in him, the Dr. Maimonides in him. He says, take a really, really close look at nature. And if you have a good eye and an astute mind, that will be, nature itself will be a pathway to your awareness of divinity, and your awareness of divinity will, from awareness, you will turn that into a love of divinity. So I'm only bringing this up because I want us to understand from where Maimonides is coming from. When he talks about the love and awe of God, he points to nature. He does, I'm not saying he discounts Torah, okay? I'm not saying he discounts ethical and moral behavior. Of course he includes that, but he very much emphasizes the natural way of life is the way we acquire love and awe of God. He interprets divine intervention not as thunderbolts and lightning bolts coming from heaven in some miraculous way. He rather interprets divine intervention as contingent on our being in the presence, creating a divine presence, creating a mishkan that lives within, and that is the way through which divine providence is going to exert its energies. It's more, I think Maimonides' interpretation of divine providence is a therapeutic. It's coming from us. It's more like itaruta dilatata. It's stirrings from us that create divine intervention through our awareness and perception, rather than lightning bolts coming down and changing circumstances down here. Friends, did Maimonides, author of the guide, manage himself to live in the God presence? Was he able to free himself in the way that he guides his students and readers, that living in the divine presence is going to be the source of intervention for us, because we have switched the way that we perceive life and perceive the world? So I say to that question, considering his biography and his writings on his brother's death, and taking into consideration Maimonides' intolerable schedule that he kept when he was living in Egypt, and when he was the chief medical officer to the Sultan's court. From all of those sources, I don't think that he was fully free. I don't think he was fully free. I don't believe that Maimonides set himself up as like a kind of guru, exhorting his students to strive for the peaks of enlightenment that he himself had reached. I think Maimonides, ultimately, as a teacher, he did not only show his students and us the way, he gave us hints along the journey of how perception and how awareness can change us, and therefore change the world for us, change our perceptions. I think he also admitted along the way that he himself was walking the very same path that we are walking. Now, friends, I'd like to begin a little part where I present to you some of the great objections to the Maimonidean philosophy. And I also want to impart to you that as these objections created a totally different stream of thinking within Jewish intellectual and spiritual movement across the centuries. As these objections were submitted, that it still is extremely important to keep Maimonidean principles alive and well, and that there is a possibility that even according to those that vehemently objected to the Maimonidean, the Aristotelian kind of Greek-based way of perceiving divinity and perceiving divine involvement, as vehement as these objections are going to be, that it's still vitally important to keep Maimonidean principles intact. Friends, whatever I'm going to say in the next few lectures, and the next few lectures are going to be countering Maimonidean thought, whatever I'm going to say in the next few lectures is not going to be a negation of Maimonidean principles, but really, I believe an addition to Maimonidean principles, an extension of Maimonidean principles, an embellishment to Maimonidean principles. I want us to view the next three classes as two sides of the same piece of paper. Michael, you want to say something about two sides to the of the same piece of paper? Because I remember you brought this metaphor up years ago, and tell us something about two sides of the same piece of paper.
Okay, yeah, now you can hear me now. Okay. Yeah, good morning. Thank you. Two sides of the same piece of paper is, well, everything's connected together, and we can see it from one side or the other. And going back just for a moment, Rabbi, to what you said at the beginning of your talk today, that divine presence in our world, if we're following that, the more perception we have of it, we will become free from pain and distress. And kind of immediately my mind said, well, what about pleasure and joy? If we're going to become free from one set of worldly principles and worldly actions from the study and the sense of divine presence, how can we let go of one and just hold on to the other? So there was a question there, but as you were talking the last couple of minutes, it kind of disappeared because I realized that side of the paper was far off in the distance. And it'd be nice to let go of some of the pain and sorrow that's there and appreciate more of the pleasure and the joy. And when it gets to the point of the two sides of the paper getting closer and closer and closer together and they become one, I'll worry about it at that time. So I think I see the two sides as we have the free will, we have the option to choose which side of the paper we want to be observing in any particular moment. And the guide to the perplexed maybe leaves out, it seemed as you were speaking today in the last number of weeks, maybe a little bit dry from the sense from the Hasidic point of view, that there's more kind of more connection. Maybe in this analogy, the paper, the two sides of the paper get closer together in the Hasidic point of view, and they're a little further apart. What I was calling a little drier, more intellectual. In Maimonides, there was that something kind of left out. Some years ago, you were talking about the wheat the baker and the wheat and the different forms of the wheat, if it's made into a sweet cookie or just the raw wheat by itself, it's got that same kind of feeling of a deeper, closer connection that maybe differentiates for me the two sides of the paper.
Okay, Mike, this is exactly what I'm using the word objection, and I do believe it's a historically true word. My point, and I think Mike's insight. My point is that one can view this side of a piece of paper, and I'm talking about a blank piece of paper, this side of the piece of paper and the other side of the piece of paper as two different entities. One is side A and one is side B. However, so that would be the Maimonidean philosophy in side A, and side B, what we are going to see very soon is going to be the mystical side. Side B is the mystical side. And I am telling you that although we are differentiating, I am going to differentiate between the side A, Maimonidean, kind of intellectual, dry, even scientific way of looking at spirituality. Maimonides was looking at spirituality in a scientific manner. And the mystics are going to be viewing it in a mystical, spiritual manner. I am saying that side A and side B at one level, at one area of perception, are one. Are one. Side A and side B of the same piece of paper are really one. And that we do not, on one level, we do differentiate between the two different sides, but on another level, side A and side B can be merged in our minds as one piece of paper. It's analogous to Chesed and Gevura, two supposed opposite energies, when they merge and together and intercourse and create and meld together in perfect harmony, Tiferet is born. And Tiferet is the newly created energy level of one unit when Chesed and Gevura are merged.
Rabbi, I have a comment, and then Debbie. It was your hand is up, and then Debbie. And Sandra. Okay. Oh, your hand is blending into your background there. So I've always been, well, always, since you introduced the Sitra, or the two sides, it's like become part of how I interpret the world. Mike says, the two pieces can be far apart, and we have the ability to choose. And I think the world is that piece of paper. It's saying and instead of but. It's not an either or world. Contradictory things exist and coincide. And they can both or more be true. And then we can decide what we're going to do with that. Are we going to listen to both sides and create Tiferet? Or are they for us contradictory, and we acknowledge they exist?
And never the two shall meet.
Right. So it's just what humanity.
Marshalla, you are describing very properly the world of duality. And I am trying to say, like, to an extent, that the world of duality is not, yes, it is divided. Duality is divided, and there ostensibly is like choice A or choice B. It's either one of the two, or and this is what I'm going to attempt to do at the end of like 3 lectures, or find within the apparent duality strong elements of unity. And attempting with our power, our energy of perception and intuition, to create out of what ostensibly looks dual, to create and to find, to discover the unity within duality. And that's really our job on earth. That's our job on earth. Our world, Marcia, you are correct. Our world is full of choices, is full of dual choices. And to discover where lies the unity within the ostensible duality that we see all around us is our mission. Is our mission as human beings, is actually the Jewish mission, is to discover and to extract echadness, oneness, out of this world of duality, is to seek out the oneness in all areas, on all levels of life. Marcia, I'm seeing your lips move.
Yeah, I forgot to unmute myself. So Sandra, go ahead, unmute yourself. The mic.
Okay, Rabbi, I need to know your opinion of this. It's been bothering me for a long time, ever since we started this. You say that the more we live in divine presence, the more we will be freed from pain and distress. We have a Chabad rabbi family here. Their daughter was found floating in the pool. And while she was dying in the hospital, I spoke to her grandmother, and her grandmother said, it's in God's hands. Okay, now, is that, and then she subsequently died, and it was in God's hands. Now, is that because she is living in the divine presence and she can accept it and she can be content with the outcome? Or is she talking about God interfering in their lives?
I don't know what she's talking about. It's impossible for me to know. But knowing such people and their faith systems, the God presence that she has developed in her mind, in her soul, is such that people who do not live in divine presence, and there's a lot of ramifications, a lot of I'm making like general statements, but people that do not have that capacity of that presence, that God presence in their lives, something like that happening to them, they would have no reason to live any longer. The parents would jump off a bridge. They would have no reason for living any longer. This might be an example of someone who is living in God presence, is going to be as mournful and as horrified by the death, God forbid, 1,000 times, the death of a child during the lifetime of a parent. However, as Maimonides says, one's perception, and I don't mean this as it is in God's hand, it is in one's perception, one's infinite possibilities of what this God presence means in a person's life. It serves as some semblance of a cushion, some semblance of a something that can make sense out of something that is nonsensical. It is some semblance of a cushion, and it helps us go through life without having emergency distress buttons going off every second of our life. The God presence calms us down somehow and becomes a cushion, which is now a different word for divine providence. Yeah, thank God she has developed that. Marcia, anyone else quickly?
Rab, when Michael spoke, I got it. I was really there. And then when you brought up your thing, the word same, and the more I thought about it, is it that if it's the same piece of paper, or is it to give them the same amount of deference to, let's say, Gevurah and Chesed to get to the Tiferet? Is it the balance of the power of each area? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Side A, even though it looks like side A and side B, side A doesn't exist without side B, and side B doesn't exist without side A, and it is for that reason why we can even think of this duality and try to find a unity in it, because side A is not independent of side B and vice versa. They are both equally creating the piece of paper. So that's how we are able to even attempt to find a unity and not leave it A and B. Okay, thank you, Debbie. That was good. Okay, so friends, I'm going to present listen to this. I'm going to present the mystical, Hasidic esoteric view of divinity and divine involvement. Not now the Maimonidean, but the mystical and Hasidic and esoteric view of divinity and divine involvement as represented by early and latter Kabbalists, such as people that you know, that you are friendly with, you are their best friends, such as the Ari of Tzfat, the Baal Shem Tov of Mezebush, Ukraine. Just as an aside, friends, you know, talking about Ukraine, you know how many Hasidic masters that I have quoted over the last 23 years, mamish, have come from the Ukraine? Do you know how many Hasidic mystics and masters and wisdom teachers have come from the Ukraine? It's like mamish unbelievable. It's unbelievable. You know, Ukraine and Russia, as you well know by now, like have switched borders over the not only decades but over the centuries. The first Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, is buried in the Ukraine. The Baal Shem Tov sprung up from the Ukraine. Reb Nachman of Breslov lived and flourished in Uman and the city of Breslov, Ukraine. Reb Moshe Lev Misasov comes from Ukraine. Friends, you would not believe the type of mystical wisdom that was occurring in little towns and little villages in the Ukraine. The Ukraine is what was a headquarters of mystical innovation for 300 to 400 years. So it's funny. So I'm going to be quoting the mystics and the Hasidic masters of the past on divinity and divine presence and divine intervention. And I'm going to be including today's contemporary mystical wisdom teachers that carried the tradition from centuries ago, like today's wisdom teachers, as you well know, I have been taught, and I quote all the time from A.J. Heschel to the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Mendel of Schneerson, and going to Rav Kook's theology, to Reb Zalman's theology, to Arthur Green's theology, and many others. So when I say the mystical wisdom teachers, I'm referring to all of them from the early 11th century up to today's. And friends, I want to start off with this. At the root of their cumulative theology is the claim and this is quite explosive, is the claim that God is in search of man. And that is actually a gorgeous 300-page book. The title of Abraham Joshua Heschel's one out of his 25 books, one of his seminal theological Jewish presentations is this. So you can remember it by the title, but the title of this book, friends, is the root of 4 centuries of Jewish mysticism. And that is the idea that God is in search of man. And I will explain in a bit why that is a near erratic idea. Those 6 words is a summary of nearly 1,500 years of Jewish mysticism. That God is in search of man. That is the fundamental statement about divinity, about God in Judaism, period. And it is those 6 words that put nearly Maimonidean philosophy on its head. That is the fundamental 6 words that differentiate Maimonidean and Aristotelian philosophy from the mysticism of the Ari and the Baal Shem Tov. Those 6 words. Those 6 words are going to change your perception of the Torah and of scripture in general and of everything else in Judaism, whether you accept man, God is in search of man or not. It's going to change your total outlook. So we have to ask ourselves, God in search of man, God in search of man. So we have to ask ourselves, why? Why is God in search of man? Why? This is rhetorical, but ponder it. Why is God in search of man? I'm telling you, and Heschel's telling you, this is the cornerstone of the entire Jewish religion. The Jewish path of spirituality is based on the idea that God is in search of man. Why would God be in search of man? So this is a highly, we can talk about this for a whole other course. Why is God in search of man? Because mystically speaking, the mystics, the wisdom teachers in our mystical tradition had no problems, had no hesitation whatsoever to answer, why is God in search of man? Because God is in need of man. That's why. That's something to ponder, Chavra. They didn't mind saying that. That God has a need. Maimonides? Maimonides, God has a need? The idea of divinity somehow being in need of man is central to Judaism, is central to all mystical thought. And actually, if you take a look at it carefully or summarily, God being in need of man pervades every page of the Bible, pervades every page of Chazal, of our sages, and all Talmudic literature. If you take an overview, friends, of the Torah, all the episodes, all the incidences, all the deep messages that you remember from the Torah, don't you conclude yourself that God is in need of man? The whole Torah is about this interchange between God, but first between Adam and Eve, and then Noah, and then Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Sarah, the whole, and Moses and the slaves in Egypt. The whole Torah is all about this divinity that seems to be in need of interaction and relationship with humankind's Geschäften, with humankind's business. The whole Torah is God somehow bringing divinity's interest into our business, into our realms, into our worlds, into our presence. On a very simplistic manner. Philosophy, the art of thinking, Greek thought, Aristotelian thought, and Maimonidean thought cannot permit or make any space for such a claim. God in search of man. Why? Because God needs man. Greek philosophy, Maimonidean philosophy cannot permit such a thought. And certainly couldn't couch it the way Heschel couched it, or the way we use this expression, God in search of man, God in need of man. I want to make this clear. This is side A and side B of the page. I want to make it very clear. To Maimonides, God is absolute. God is absolute other and incomparable to anything that we see here in this world of Malchut. In every way. And I like the fact that Maimonides emphasized that idea. God is other. And that other has to be implanted in us in all. I see all your faces. You are all going to be recipients of a different imagination and a different envisionment of God. But one thing Maimonides wants every Jew, every monotheist to include in our envisionment, in our imagination, is that one thing. God is nothing like you, even the way you imagine God in the most ethereal and the most absolute manner, you still don't have it right. Because God is totally other. This energy that we call God, this infinity, this Ein Sof. Whatever imaginations and envisionments you have of it, however pure, we're never going to get it. God is absolute. God is absolute. God is absolute other. And Maimonides goes on, which I think is an important teaching in and of itself. That we can't speak about God. And we cannot describe God. And that ultimately, divinity is unknowable. It is a thing, a force, an ion, a nothingness that is everythingness. And we do not have the capacity to describe or to envision the all-pervasive, all-encompassing thing that we are calling God, and the mysteriousness of this divinity. Maimonides is asking us to surrender to this idea that something exists that you will never, ever be able to wrap your little kepelach around. You'll never be able to touch that thing. You'll never be able, with our five senses, to really grasp the complete picture of this thing that we call divinity. Maimonides basically concludes in his very beautiful but yet sterile and scientific non-description of divinity when Maimonides quotes I have quoted this many a time to you, but he quotes it in this context where he says, he quotes 3 words from the Psalms. Silence, when it comes to divinity, silence is praise to thee. I love that. Demia is silence. Lecha tehila. Silence to you is praise. Because any other description of divinity, Maimonides is trying to get it through any description of divinity in verbal words, in human language, is going to be a distortion. And I love that, Chevra. I love to know that whatever I'm going to say, I talk a lot about God. But you know what? In the back of my consciousness, when I speak about God, when I speak descriptively about God in any manner, you know what I'm saying to myself? I'm saying lie, bullshit. Because I do believe in my deepest heart of hearts that whatever I am saying about divinity, but except for absolute silence, is a little bit of a distortion. And I like to keep that in my head as I speak about God and describe God. I like to keep that in the back of my, I like to keep Maimonides in my subconscious. And I want you to keep, whatever I say, whatever anybody says, accept what they're saying, hear what they're saying, appreciate what they're saying, or reject what they're saying. But even if you accept and appreciate what one is saying, have that little angel in the back of your subconscious saying, Demia lecha tehila. Ultimately, silence, reverential, radical amazement, amazing silence is the only real thing that we can say about divinity.
Rabbi, would now be an okay time for us to break the silence with some questions?
Perfect.
Shabri, and then Linda.
That was good. Break the silence. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much. So, Rabbi, I was thinking several things, and one is the last thing you took up about silence, because you started to describe silence, radical silence. You can't describe silence. How can we, human beings, describe what even that means, that silence that we sit in? And I also think, because I don't like to use the word think, because even when you start thinking, it's taking yourself away from being. And the being, it might get you somewhere to a greater understanding or experience. It's always in the experience. I believe that in my heart of hearts, like you believe in my heart of hearts, I believe that we will know what that is. And it might come on at death. It might come as a revelation in our everyday lives. Who knows? But if I give up the idea that I'll never know, if I give up that idea that I'll never know, I don't think, I would prefer to think I will know. I will know. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Shabri, I appreciate what you're saying. We're talking about very deep things, so I really get what you're saying. It's all a question of degree. It's all a question of degree. It's all a question of how vast have I opened up my heart and soul to the idea of divinity, and how in that vastness, how little I admit I know.
It's true. You're right. You're definitely right.
So it all depends on that. You know who saw the most? Who saw the most of divinity? And who saw the most, and because he saw the most, admitted that I know the least. Because I've seen the most, I know the least.
Moses.
So right. It's a question of degrees. The vaster our wisdom of divinity is, the more we realize we mamish know gornisht mit gornisht. Those that have not experienced the vastness are the ones that think they know the most. The ones who have seen and envisioned the most know they know the least. So it's not a matter of knowing, it's a matter of knowing that you don't know. That's what brings wisdom, truly.
Linda?
Marshalla, are we okay to go?
No, here I am. So I'm still stuck on the idea that God needs us. And so it led me to the question, keeping in mind divinity and connection, does God evolve as we evolve?
Linda, beautiful. I haven't yet gotten too deep into how and why God needs us. I threw that out.
That's what I wrote.
I'm not yet in the epicenter of explaining that. I'm still in the area where Maimonides and Aristotle, this idea of God needing us is a is a claim that is that cannot be comprehended, cannot be permitted in their philosophy. Okay, so be patient.
And here I was thinking,
I didn't
about-
explain it yet.
I understand.
I
was
brought it
think-
into the conversation, and I'm trying to explain that to be clear on one side of the paper, that Maimonidean philosophy of divinity and divine playing in this world cannot tolerate this idea of God in search of man and God in need of man. Okay, so I'm still trying to create the duality, the delineation.
And I was thinking of
And
it
what-
more like the Olympic
and
logo.
while I'm delineating, I'm saying Maimonides has a point. God is indefinable. God is indescribable. God is Ein Sof, transcendent, infinite, and transcendent beyond transcendent. So what are the mystics trying to say? God is in need. That is unacceptable language. So we're going to get into the mystical thing soon.
Okay.
But silence. So I'm lauding in a way, as we are going to argue with the Rambam. I am lauding the Rambam, that there is an absolute fantastic truth. Whatever we are going to say further about what the mystics, how the mystics were able to describe divinity and divine play in this world, just remember, we're still using human words to describe all of this, and the little angel in our subconscious does have to agree with Maimonides to a certain extent, that whatever we are going to explain, whatever we're going to describe, is really a distortion, because the only thing in the presence of divinity there is really only silence. Awesome, radically amazing silence. And I think it was Chabris, or I'm not sure whether it was. How do you know about silence? You should know that in mystical thought, silence is on the level of Keter. It's not anywhere in the 7 lower Sfirot. This kind of silence that we are talking about is the Keter level. And if you have had a kind of awesome silent experiential moment of silence with a capital S, you will know. You only know it if you experience it. In a meditative state, in many other types of state, silence with a capital S is equivalent to the Keter level. Because in Keter, there is nothing but silence. There is nothing but silence. There's no expression. There is like pure, unadulterated, infinite silence. and even on the human level, Chevra, I have to tell you, in some of my experiences, I have seen both very holy and righteous men and women in prayer, davening, in silence, that if I didn't know about the holiness of silence, I would be introduced to the holiness of silence just by watching them. I've been in the presence of Abraham Joshua Heschel while he was davening in silence. And just watching Abraham Joshua Heschel, just watching some of the great people that I have been gifted to see, I've heard him lecture, and but there was nothing. There was no lecture that I ever heard from Abraham Joshua Heschel that compared to me for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes for a mincha one time, just watching him daven mincha, like the Amidah, in silence. So we can all get to that place also.
Rabbi, Donna has her hand up.
Yeah.
Hi, good to see you. My question is a question and a statement. If God did not have a desire to either know us, can you hear me? Let me make it louder. Hold on.
Yeah, I think I missed one word that is going to make the difference. Yeah.
If God did not have a desire to know us and to know God's self through us, why would God have created us? You tend to create things that you, well, what is your response? I don't need to elaborate.
Donala, he wouldn't have.
Okay. So
he wouldn't have. That's what the expression Olam Chesed Yibaneh means. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. The world was created through Chesed. That's what it means.
God in search of man.
Their taka was a divine desire and a divine need to create something out of divinity's own self, outside of divinity. God needed something. God desired something outside of its own self. An independent, so to speak, an independent entity, an entity that is going to think that they are independent. That was you are like putting your question is based on the core of this
Right.
God need.
I actually said that because why would anybody question that God needs us or is in search of us? We wouldn't exist.
We wouldn't be.
Right.
We wouldn't be.
Right.
It was I mean, you just helped me define that the source and core of that need is our existence, period.
Right.
Is our being here. And our being here is a result of that divine need, and after need comes the grace that follows the need.
I agree 1,000%.
Good. Thank you, Donala.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we okay, Marcia? Oh, we have 10 minutes approximately.
10 minutes, yep.
Okay. I want to add one more Maimonidean idea that I think is a good idea, an excellent idea to keep in the subconscious of our minds, but that is going to be in total opposition to the mystical Hasidic manner of looking at it. When we talk about God's actions, divine actions, that is represented in the Torah, in all of Scripture. And Maimonides agrees that we can talk about God's actions, not about God's being, because God's being is beyond. But we can talk about how God manifests. Let's take, for example, something that is very familiar to us and very close to us, very close. When we say God is merciful, when do we say God is merciful? I'll sing it to you. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet. When we say and we attribute to divinity that you are merciful, what are we saying? Maimonides asks. Think like a Maimonidean. What are we saying according to Maimonides when we are saying God is merciful? We are saying God is merciful in the sense that if we, listen to this carefully, if we did things similar to the ones God does, we would be doing them as a result of a moral quality of mercy within us. That's what we're saying. When we are saying, God, you are merciful, what are we really saying? We are saying that the mercy, when we exercise mercy or compassion on someone, you, God, are doing what we think we are doing when we are exercising mercy. We are transposing, right? Our own experience, our own actions of mercy, and we are applying those. When we call God merciful, we are applying our human actions and our human emotions to God, correct? That's what we're actually doing when we're saying, God, you are a compassionate, merciful, loving God. And Maimonides is saying back to us, but divinity, strictly speaking, cannot be described as merciful. God does not have a human personality. How we describe God, it's the only way we can do it because we feel the experience of mercy and compassion and love. But according to Maimonidean philosophy, that is only a transposition that we are laying on divinity because we have no other way of describing it outside of human experience. But Maimonides is saying absolutely in the Godhead, the Godhead is not emotionally wired. The Godhead does not get nervous. The Godhead does not get mad. The Godhead does not say, I'm in this kind of mood. I'm in that kind of mood. I don't feel like doing this. I don't feel like doing that. Maimonides cannot conceive of a moody God. And to such a refinement, Maimonides cannot even conceive of a merciful God. We can call God merciful because we are transposing our personality traits on it. But in essence, God is not a moody God. God is something else. I don't know what, but God is not. God is not. God, basically, Chevra, basically, Maimonides is saying you got to think of God and divinity in such a pure and such a refined way, and such a super transcendent manner, that you can talk a little bit about God's mercy and God's thing, but in the back of your head, the little true voice is going to be saying, but God is above mercy. God does not have moods. God does not possess a personality. And next week, we're going to talk about the mystics that say, yes, we can talk about a God with a very colorful personality.
And on that note, we are out of time. So, I'm going to end the recording, but stay
Marcia,
tuned for
can we
announcements.
end with a
Oh.
song? It would be
Yes, of course.
a Purim sin if we didn't end with a song.
So I guess that's a yes.
Okay, very quickly. Friends, this is good, good. Have a happy Purim. I won't see you till after Purim. Do something. Put it on your mat. Do something for Purim. La la da 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 Thank you all for joining what I think is like doing a deep dive into Maimonides' head and into the Ari's head. And we're going to get to the Ari a little bit more extensively next week.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so
Rabbi.
much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Happy Purim to everybody.
Happy Purim.
Happy Purim.
Happy Purim. And stay tuned for announcements.
Bye-bye.
Don't run away.
Recording.